Hi folks, Kevin here. Well, it's July 14th, 2018, and today I'm going to do another Ask Me Anything episode. Unfortunately, it's probably over a month ago that Antonia Alvarez actually asked this question. And the question is in response to a video that I posted, I think it was March of 2017. And the video was all about how I was using compostable materials within the chicken and duck coop area where I am right now, and repiling the various materials and adding some of the vermicompost, which is red wiggler worms breaking down kitchen waste and that sort of thing. And Antonia asked, and you could see throughout the video, and I had mentioned in the video that we used hay and straw. I don't know that I mentioned wood chips, using the kitchen scraps, using sprouted fodder that we grow for the chickens and ducks during the winter months, and various other materials as well. So it's a great deal of diversity, but I think I possibly neglected to mention how I start the whole thing out. But Antonia had wondered, geez, could you replace the hay with wood chips? And the answer is yes. So first let me clarify, this isn't thermophilic composting, and I mentioned that at the end of that video. So when I'm talking about composting most of the time here on the property, I'm talking about thermophilic aerobic composting. That's making sure we're within the ideal temperature ranges, and there's lots of videos on this site of me doing the composting, mostly large composting. The other means of composting that I do is vermicomposting, using red wiggler worms and using those kitchen scraps for the most part in the bins that the red wiggler worms are in. The other techniques I use the term the chicken composting system, because that's been a YouTube topic. One of the people, I can't remember his name now, but he's located in Vermont, and Jeff Lawton had featured him. I know other people like Justin Rhodes had gone and interviewed him. But it's a Vermont composting system where he doesn't feed a large flock of chickens. He doesn't buy grains for them. The chickens feed on his professional composting system that he runs. And so within the coop, you can use a whole variety of different materials, and if it promotes the various bugs, if there's the seeds in there, and chickens love to scratch and peck, and there's all of the things that the chickens would, the greens, the food scraps, the delicious food scraps, the bugs, the worms, all of those sorts of things, the chickens absolutely love. So that system has worked very well for us. Now in that video, if you watch that video, and I'll put a link up here in the upper right hand corner to that video. In that video, you could see we had a whole bunch of chickens, and I posted videos since then, and ducks. We had quite a few ducks. But we had problems with the coyotes and the foxes coming and taking so many of our birds and all. And this past winter, I had actually converted this whole chicken and duck coop area. Well, not converted it, but I modified it. So the original roost or perch wasn't where it is right now. So that perch there is one that actually swings up and hooks up above, but it was on this post right here, right behind me. And so what I would do is take all the materials that have been slowly, very slowly decomposing on the floor that the chickens had scratched through. So in the fall time, I take leaves, pile them up in here. If we had pats of hay that got wet or whatnot, or we made bales in here available for the chickens and the ducks, like getting up on the bales during the daytime. Some of them would actually even roost on those instead of being on the large perching system, the ones that got picked on anyways. And we take all that material that had been on the floor of the coop, and I'd pile it up, and the chickens are little entropy engines. They'd go ahead and they'd peck and scratch at it, and gradually that pile would come out to a more level area within the coop, be very wide distributed. And they would pick through and get everything that they wanted, and then I'd go ahead and repile this stuff up again. So when I put in bags of leaves and all, certainly all the worms would be in those areas, and they'd scratch and peck it during the beginning of the fall, after remaking the whole coop floor system, and the wood chips that we put in. So the coop usually started out before, every 2 years I'd completely clean out the coop, and I'd start off with 6 inches of wood chips, not finely ground wood chips. You've seen the wood chips on the channel that we get. And I'd spread that out, and then and that's very porous. So when the ducks are in here, the water would flow right through it nice and easily and all. And since it doesn't rain in here, no other water comes in here. All the vegetable matter, the feces, the messes from the water system and all, would help to gradually moisten the materials on the floor surface. And with so many birds working in the area, they'd be constantly turning the system and making deposits with their elimination, their bowel movements. So they would go through and work the whole area, get it inoculated with all their microorganisms from their deposits. Certainly the microorganisms from all the vegetable material or the weeds or the crop materials that we put in here on the floor would get mixed in with the material. And it'd be very slowly breaking down, but it'd be breaking down. So what I ended up doing, pile it up. It would start to heat up a little bit. The worms that I would inoculate or put into the systems would go to the cooler areas. The chickens would be going after them. Their casts would hatch and be more worms as well. So it was a really nice system. And then at the end of the cycle, at 2 years' time, all of this material got moved out either into one of the garden bed areas. Now, it didn't take care of all the weed seeds, or it went into the compost pile. Most of the time it went into the compost pile or into the food forest at the base of the various trees. Very, very nutrient rich. But yes, a lot of the starting materials were the wood chips to start out with. So when we had all these difficulties this last fall, winter, and spring with the coyotes and other predators coming in and taking the ducks and chickens, when spring came, we let everybody out. The ponds were full. The ducks went to there, the chickens came in here, the reduced number of chickens, and they did pretty darn well. We haven't had as many problems with the coyotes, although they're here. The coyotes and the foxes, the raccoons, they're here every single day. We see them on all the surveillance monitors. So it's been a pretty decent system since that time, but with so fewer birds, it takes longer for the substrates that we put in here, the resources that we put in here in the floor to break down. So I'm going to turn the camera around and show you what's on the floor in here right now. So as you can see over there in the far corner, there's the water pan that the ducks come in. Even though there's the ponds outside, they'll come in here. The chickens will come in at nighttime and drink out of there as well. And that water's changed every day. But the whole floor system initially starts off as wood chips. So this is all wood chips down here. Hopefully you can appreciate that. But some of the other materials you'll see in the floor in here. So right over here, these are all weeds that I weeded out of the gardens yesterday. So I put those in the wheelbarrow, bring them over here, and put it right below the roost. So that's where the chickens roost at nighttime, right up on these perches. And all around this area right down here, you might be able to detect some perlite right down in there. And what that is, those are the plugs that the plants that we didn't plant in the garden. And all around in there are various different plants. Celery right there, there's celery here. Down in here there's some red cabbage. You could see some corn cobs from last season. I put those in here as well. So we have Boo, the blind chicken, and they've got their own feeder, their own water dish in here. And we have the duck who was the lowest on the totem pole, who he got beat up all the time, so we brought him in to keep company with Boo. And you can see we harvest some of the lettuce that's bolting, or kale, or whatever it is. We bring that in here every day, and that gives them some fresh greens as well to have in here. So since they don't get to go outside, they're in here and they're getting all their fresh greens. So the short answer is yes, Antonia, and that's a great question. What materials can you use? You certainly can use wood chips. Wood chips take a bit longer to break down, of course. However, as they start to break down and mixed in with all these other materials, they become inoculated with the various, so on the underside of the wood chips, the moisture there, the darkness, the fungi start to inoculate and move into the wood chip surface. And eventually, if we turn this material, or the chickens turn the material, it gets completely inoculated by setting weeds and materials like that on top of the surface of the wood chips, by taking the soil that we use, the soilless mixture, added with the compost that we start all our transplants with. As that material that we're no longer using, I put it right in here to cover up the wood chips as well, and let that have a little bit of time. Now they do need the moisture as well. So we do make sure that there is some moisture in here as time goes on. Right now it's fairly dry in here, with the exception of the areas where the ducks really are kind of messy with the water dish as well. So hopefully this answered your question adequately. The diversity, I think, is so important as you're adding materials for the chickens and ducks to forage through. The chickens love to scratch and peck. The ducks love to go ahead and stick their beaks into the wet, moist soil as well, and eat all of those invertebrates. So if this video was of value, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends. If you want to be notified when we post more videos, hit that bell icon. And by all means, folks, have a fantastic day. Bye-bye now.